in the case and they weren't added. They found these papers and were like, the government is lying to you guys. There's more than, what we're actually seeing. So the New York Times decided, we want to publicize this. Federal government's like, no. And this was also during Nixon's time, which is really important. If there's some sort of like context question, really important to know 1971, Nixon is president during this time. And, he and the federal government basically sued the New York Times Company under the Espionage Act. And their reasoning also was on prior restraint, which is also another important thing to know. It's where the federal government can stop a publication or stop something in the name of national security. So that was their whole argument. Supreme Court said, federal government, you're wrong in this. New York Times, you're correct. And this is basically because the government's case didn't overcome a heavy presumption against prior restraint. This meant that the prior restraint argument from the federal government wasn't substantial enough to justify stopping the lower court's order of an injunction or to stop the New York Times from publicizing. And the Supreme Court basically said that it's possible for a newspaper to publish these papers and to really publish any sort of paper like this as long as it doesn't directly harm the government or the military. So if this was during, as the Vietnam War was going on, and the Pentagon papers showed, let's say, military coordinates, different strategies, different military tactics for the US, the New York Times can't publicize that because that would endanger the military. However, because this was, after the fact, and this was sort of, I believe it's after the fact, or very after, a little bit closer to after the fact. And it didn't show any specifics about military strategies or anything like that. It's not directly harmful to the government or the military. Sure, public favor of the government's going to go down, but it's not enough to be where, okay, this is like a national security issue. So this case basically said newspapers, freedom of the press is a thing. Okay, it's very hard to restrict so long as the information isn't an actual substantial threat to national security. And then Citizens United versus FEC. Fun fact, this was actually on my exam when I took it 2 years ago. And I had actually reviewed this case beforehand, so I was in luck. So this case was brought up because
everyone. So we are going to be going over the court case. Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. So for this case specifically, the Citizens United was allowed to appeal the decision directly to SCOTUS. In a 5-4 ruling, the First Amendment prohibits limits on funding independent broadcasts and elections, but it wasn't persuasive enough to restrict political speech, and political spending by corporations, associations, and labor unions ended up being protected. And this case happened in 2010, and Americans during this time, they disagreed about the extent to which funding and spending on election campaigns should be limited by the law. So, First Amendment, freedom of religion. So, Engel v. Vitale. This happened in 1962, and the case presented the question whether a public school could sanction classroom prayers. And so, in a 6-1 decision, the court ended up ruling that school-sponsored prayer is unconstitutional because it violated the Establishment Clause. Now, the Establishment Clause was basically saying that the federal government can't control how somebody practices their religion unless it cites like any violence, or it can physically harm anyone, whether verbally or physically. So Wisconsin v. Yoder, and this happened in 1972, and it was under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. Free exercise then goes back to allowing people to practice whatever religion they want to, as long as there's nothing that harms a person. And then there was state law requiring children to attend school past 8th grade violates their parents' constitutional right to direct the religious upbringing of their children. So this happened in 1972. So Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So that Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment basically states that states can't take away any person's rights if they were born here. The 14th Amendment was established to allow the formerly enslaved to be considered American citizens as they were born here. But prior to the 14th Amendment, they weren't considered to be citizens. So this was added to include those who were formerly enslaved. So Brown v. Board of Education. So in 1954, it was decided that state-sanctioned segregation of public schools violated the Constitution. This not only provided equality, but it promoted the idea that diverse students thrive better when they learn together. So this got rid of segregation in terms of the public schools and basically allowed for Black students and other minorities within the South to be integrated. Baker v. Carr. So in 1962, Baker sued the federal district court, claiming that the law required the state to redraw their districts and to make each district's representation fair. This not only established the right of federal courts to review redistricting issues or political questions, and they ended up ruling in favor of Baker, ruling that states acted unconstitutionally by not redistricting and violating the one person, one vote rule, which was a principle. And this ruling enabled federal courts to hear redistricting cases. So another case that involved districting was in 1993. It was a reapportionment plan. Basically means the redrawing of congressional districts, and was created in North Carolina, making many majority minority districts where racial minority was in the majority. So the issue was racial gerrymandering. Gerrymandering basically means that you're basically drawing districts in favor of a party or a specific person. And this violated the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. So as a result, it not only violated that protection clause, but it violated the whole 14th Amendment because the district lines were too weirdly drawn. And the impact of this was that race could not be a sole factor in redistricting and became inspected really more strictly to prevent this from happening in the future. So federalism through court decisions. Federalism basically describes how a single territory is ruled by a central government and or state or local government. And we're going to see that through these court cases. So Gideon v. Wainwright in 1963. So Gideon was charged with breaking and entering into a pool hall, and when he requested an attorney for this case, he was denied. And this led to the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Gideon and guaranteeing the right to legal counsel, which is the Sixth Amendment. Woo. So McDonald versus Chicago, right? In 2010, this happened fairly recently. McDonald filed a suit against the state saying that the city's new gun law violated his Second Amendment rights. And this was a 5-4 majority vote, basically ruled that the right to possess a gun in a home for self-defense is protected under the Second Amendment and the Due Process Clause. Due process meaning that all natural-born citizens of the United States have the right to a trial within the 14th Amendment. And now we're going to do a cram quiz to test your knowledge of what you gained from this session. So the cram quiz is basically going to go over what we just learned, and it's going to test you on basically on a kind of varying level of basically a varying level of how hard the questions will be. It'll be pretty easy if you paid attention, but it's just basically on the documents, the court cases that we just went over, and we're really excited for this opportunity for you guys. We're doing this so you guys will go into the exam more prepared than last time, more prepared, and we're really excited, and we're going to give you the opportunity to practice this now with the cram quiz.
give you guys 10, 15 more seconds to answer this question. It's good. 78% of you guys got this question, which is really, really good. So this was just basically talking about what made the article so weak, or why did many people consider it to be weak. And with this question, it's also one of the questions that you might see on the exam. So if you know what the Articles of Confederation were, like I said, earlier, like 40 minutes ago, and why they were weak, just pick out which one made it weak, and that should be your correct answer. So moving on.
Yeah, good job, guys.
Second. Let's see if we can get all before it. All right. So, 89%. I like that. So, what effect did lack of executive branch and government structure established by AOC have on the U.S.? Correct. There was no uniform execution or enforcement of laws nationwide. So if you got this question wrong, which not a lot of you guys did, this is also another one question where if you know what the government structure was like under AOC, this question will just be like lack of nationwide or federal government. Look for that, you'll get your correct answer. Next question. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys like 5 more seconds. Right, okay, so 72%, which is still good. What significant element was missing from the national government under AOC? Lack of an executive branch to enforce laws. If you're paying attention to the last question, this also sort of went into it as well. A bicameral legislature for lawmaking purposes, even though that sort of was, it actually wasn't even missing. It was the fact that there was like no, what is it called? Like one like legislative or like federal government that was together with everything else. So bicameral isn't like a significant element. I believe it is one of them or not. I might be mistaken, but the lack of executive branch is the most significant one. more seconds. All right, so, ooh, 92%. Oh, you guys know your stuff. Okay. What was the major issue faced under AOC? Central government lacked power to impose taxes. That is very true, and that was actually a very important thing to know. So, for the next couple questions, I will give you guys 20 seconds to answer. I know it seems like, really a really short amount of time, but if you know the question, you'll get it. If not, I'll bump it up to about 30. So, here we go. Right. Ooh, 56. Okay. So, what was one consequence when each state retained sovereignty and independence under the Articles? Correct answer C, the lack of a unified foreign policy, complicated negotiations with other nations. So, though we didn't specifically go over like the foreign policy under the Articles or anything else like that, this is sort of a what's it called? Like when you press like the incorrect answer, I forget like the actual method about that. But that's sort of what it is. So it's not a national court system. That had nothing to do with sovereignty and independence under the Articles. So you can throw that away. Some states became monarchies separate from others in practice. Not necessarily. Each state had their own sort of laws that they could, enforce. And it wasn't that there was like an overarching federal government law to like follow. It was each state had their own. Virginia had their own. Massachusetts had their own. But it wasn't to the point of becoming a monarchy. That's what they were running away from. So, that's also not an option. And D, each state printed its own version of a national constitution. That doesn't make sense. If each state has their own version of a national constitution, it's like saying it doesn't make sense. There's a national constitution, and then each state has their own state constitution. So, state having a version of a national constitution is just a state constitution, which also didn't retain sovereignty or independence under the Articles. So it's just a lack of foreign policy. So that's like sort of a I can't remember the word. Just cross out the incorrect answer. That's the method. All right. If you know your amendment, the question should be nice and easy. If not, we'll need to do some studying. All right, Fourth Amendment, 84%. Yay. So in the chat, if you guys can just say what case goes with Fourth Amendment, if there is one, I believe there is one. Yes, there is one. Um, if you guys can try and tell me what case that is, that would be a good start. I think if you can. If not, then we can move on to the next question. Um, but is there like a Supreme Court case that goes over the Fourth Amendment, at least? Minimally. You guys some time to think about that, but then we'll move on to the next question. We might do another one after this question and then move on with our night. math, by the way. And cats, too, Nicholas. Yeah, that's nice. Alright. You guys, 5 more seconds? One. 0.5. Oh, you guys are glancing. Okay, reveal then. Alright. So, what is the main concern expressed by Brutus One about the proposed constitution? C, it would create a national government too powerful to control. So, if you picked B on undermining individual liberty and freedom, that was actually okay. So, Brutus number one, like, how Kayla went over it, right? It's basically talking about how putting too much power in one government, hence the federal government, would be too powerful for states control, right? States wouldn't have their own power, they wouldn't have, like, their own sovereignty and everything else. It wasn't necessarily about undermining individual liberty and freedom for every individual. It was mainly talking about the states and their own power against a federal government. Okay, does that make sense? So we're not really focusing on every like person. So let's say, my individual sovereignty, Kayla's individual sovereignty. It's mainly talking about each state's sovereignty and each state's power against the federal government. So hopefully that makes sense about Brutus. So it's not individual, it's states. A, it's not talking about strong central government. They actually didn't really want that either, so you can knock that out. And direct democracy, that sort of idea wasn't explicitly said in Brutus. And from the top of my head, I don't even think they mentioned anything of that sort. So it'd be between B and C. But just remember, Brutus is talking about state liberty and freedom. And I think we have time for one more question, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully. Yep, all right, so we'll do one more question. Last question, guys. Close, close. So. I might have lost my so what is the last question?
All right, our time has now come to an end. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate you guys being here. We want to announce that one more time that we would like you guys to sign up for Cram Mode. You get 40 prep books on one searchable platform, which is our wonderful platform, Fiveable. You get 24-hour access to it, and you get tickets to all Cram events and finales. Again, it costs $40 a year and $10 a month. And we thank you guys so much. We're having another preview this Wednesday at the same time here on Crowdcast. And once again, we want to thank you guys so much for your time, and get studying. You guys got this. Don't worry about it. Just if you missed something, rewatch this Crowdcast, and you guys got this.
Yep, don't worry. The AP exam, if you guys know, I don't know if you guys can actually hear me. But if you guys have the exam, if you know your materials, you'll do well. So good luck, guys.
Definitely. And also take the little survey at the that's showing up right now on your screen. But other than that, thank you. Have a good night, and rewatch this recording if you need anything else. You guys got this. Preview on Wednesday.
Yep. All right, good luck, guys.